Blessings, friends. This is Pastor Nick kicking off a new YouTube channel, Hope Filled in 5, where my desire is once a week at least to come to you and bring you a message from God that can bring hope into your lives in 5 minutes or less. So today, I want to talk about disciples. Not specific or not vague discipleship, but a specific to disciples, right? We know of the 12. We've seen the list. We've heard of them. But I want to talk about two that you often don't hear about. I want to talk about Simon the Zealot and James, son of Alphaeus, sometimes called James the Lesser. So these are two interesting disciples, and what I want to do is spend the next 6 weeks talking about all 12 disciples and seeing about their characteristics for something I'm calling what disciple am I, right? Who do I relate to in the disciples? And I think these two, Simon the Zealot and James, son of Alphaeus, James the Lesser, are two that many of you might actually relate to. An interesting thing about these two disciples is they're listed 4 times in the scripture, in the New Testament. And every time they're listed, they're only listed in the lists, right? So only when the roll is called, only when it says in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then again in Acts, here are the disciples that Jesus called. No other time do we hear their names said, right? They didn't push back on Jesus, right? We don't hear that they questioned him or how he was teaching or what he was doing. We don't hear that they went to him in the evening when nobody else was around and asked to sit on his right and left side. We don't hear that they doubted him or that they got called up onto the mountain for that transfiguration experience. All we hear is that they were chosen specifically by Jesus, and they showed up. What I know from this is that I think these two disciples will relate with many of you. Because many people in the church aren't flashy, right? Many people in the church don't take leadership roles, and they really don't desire to have leadership roles. What they desire to have is that role behind the scenes, right? We all know that in churches and in other civic organizations too, but in churches, there is a group, generally a core group of people that no matter what the event is, it a potluck? Is it a church cleanup? Is it working in the school? Is it the food pantry? Are we going on a small mission trip? Whatever the case is, this core group of people will always show up. They're there, they're ready to work, they're ready to donate, they're ready to help, but they don't want to be called up front, right? Don't call them up front, up onto the front of the church to the chancel and clap for them. They're happy to work behind the scenes. This is what these two disciples should be known for. These are behind the scenes doers. They were there when Jesus called them. They were there when Jesus commissioned the disciples, and they're there when the church began to be formed early in the book of Acts. We don't hear the story. They didn't write letters that were then compiled to become our New Testament. We don't hear the story of where they go from there. And in fact, it's not until a couple centuries later that church leaders and early Christian writers actually even start to reference them. And one of the things we hear is that potentially James the Lesser went to Egypt. That's where he was sent to be an apostle, to be a teacher. But it doesn't matter if that's 100% true or if that's just church teaching that's been handed down and has become tradition, because we know that believers are called to all different myriads of work and ministry. Some are called to be Peter, right? To be organizers, to be the men and women that are up in front and are directing what's going on. And many others are called to be those who build those small, intimate, personal relationships. We all know, because we've all had experience with these behind-the-scenes people, these doers who get it done. They're the ones that at the coffee house, that sitting during break having pizza when you're doing an event, that in fellowship time before or after church, that are willing to sit with you. They've got the time to sit and share the good news, share how God has worked in their lives. So if this is who you are, right? If this is how you feel God calls you into ministry, then friends, you're not alone. You follow in this amazing tradition of Simon the Zealot and James the Lesser as those God called to work behind the scenes and get it done. Throughout this series, what I hope to do is bring to life the 12 disciples, not as these amazing saints that were called by Jesus, but as regular men who he picked out from the crowd, picked up on the seashore, called from behind the tax desk, and said, I've got more important things for you to do. That's what God does to all of us. He finds us where we are, meets us with his arms wide open, fills us with his love, and says, I've got more important work for you. Work that changes lives. Not just your life, but the lives of those around you. So friends, if this is who you are, or if this is just a little bit of who you are, be filled with hope. God has a plan for you. That plan is to be where you are and share the good news with those around you. Until we meet again next week, know that I am praying right now and will continue to pray for everyone who this message reaches. Not my message, but a message from God to be filled with his hope and his love.